So let's talk about securing WordPress in 2021. Now, here's what we're going to cover, okay? We're going to talk first about the most important topic, locking your website down, okay? We need to make sure that everything is locked down and that it is as secure as possible, okay? We'll probably spend the majority of our time in that section. Then we're going to talk about keeping things updated because that's a huge part of security. I was using WordPress back in the days when if a plugin came out with an update, I noticed it because I got an email from the author and I went and downloaded it, the zip file, and installed it myself. And the same thing with WordPress. We just install over top of what we've got. Thank goodness those days are gone. It's a lot easier to keep things updated, but it's important that we do it right. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do things right. And then we're going to talk about what to do when all of this is not enough. Okay. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what you should do if your site gets compromised. So that's basically where we're going to start. And then at the end, if I've got time, I will take questions or take the questions that are there. If I don't get to your questions, we always use those questions as fodder for blog posts or future webinars and stuff like that. So please, the questions are important. Even if I don't get to answer them directly, make sure that you do ask them. Okay, so what does locking it down mean? Here's the thing you have to understand. Security is not a destination. You can't do this, and say, okay, I am secure, okay? Security is a series of compromises that we make. Now, if we make it too difficult for our users to use our site, well, nobody will, okay? On the other hand, if we ignore good security practices just to reduce the friction, well, we're asking for trouble at that point. As a general rule of thumb, you need to assume that everybody that visits your website is trying to break into it. Yeah, that's more than a little bit of paranoid. But if you look at that, every decision you make through that lens, then you'll at least consider security at every turn. I mean, every plugin you install, every theme you activate, every contractor that you hire, everything you do has security ramifications, and you have to consider security to keep your site secure and to keep it humming right along. So here are some of the things that you can do to make sure that your site is as secure as possible. Now, nothing I should say here in this webinar should be considered expert advice. This is generalities, okay? Expert advice can only be given to you by someone who has access to your site, who has looked at how you have things set up and can make concrete recommendations. I'm going to make some recommendations to you. Some of them are do this because this is a good idea. Other ones are go research this because there are options out there you have. Either way, if you are in doubt, please contact a security expert or a WordPress security expert and enlist their help in securing your site. Okay, SSL. I know, that's the easy one. Everybody should start here. This is no longer a good idea. This is basically table stakes. If you've got a website, it should have SSL. Now, the good news is SSL is free these days. I mean, I started out SSL certificates, even the minimum ones, were $300, $350 a piece. I had to go through verification and all of this. Well, thankfully, those days are gone. If all you want is encryption, and that's the base level, then Let's Encrypt is free. And most all the top tier web hosts have that on their control panel. You can go and say, create me a Let's Encrypt certificate and keep it updated, and then force my website to use this encryption. It's pretty easy these days. If your web host doesn't do that, Or if you're hosting your own, and yes, I host my own on several of them, okay, figure out how to do it. If you're hosting your own and you're running Linux, ping me. I've got a script that I use that I'm happy to share. It's up on my blog post, but I got a new version of it. But I'm happy to share it with you that will show you how to do that. I don't recommend hosting your own. That's a special kind of pain that only certain ones of us enjoy. But for certain sites, I have to host my own, and I do have a script to keep the SSL up to date. Strong passwords. Strong passwords are now built into WordPress. Okay, use them. Every account that you have that has any privilege whatsoever, and I don't mean your subscribers and stuff like that, but admins, editors, authors, these people, these kind of roles, any role that you have created that has any kind of privilege in your site at all needs to have a secure password, okay, a strong password. Look, it's right there, okay, in WordPress. If you click set a new password, it's going to suggest a very strong password for you. Now, I know this sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times I see this violated. Don't write this down, okay? Don't take it, put it on a Post-it note, and stick it on your monitor. Somebody will figure it out, okay? If you create a strong password and you're having trouble remembering it, use a password manager. 1Password or any of these type password managers are great for this kind of thing. I use Avast virus scanner, and that has it has a plugin for my browser, and it keeps track of them that way, and that's perfectly fine because I use a ton of these secure passwords. There's no way I could remember them all, but whatever you do, don't write them down, but do use them, okay? Now, whether you require your users, subscribers and things like that, to use strong passwords, well, that depends on what you're doing. If all you're storing on about your users is their email address and their password and maybe their country, okay, then it's probably not that important. But if you have any kind of personal identifying information beyond that, if you're storing addresses, God forbid, if you're storing banking information, healthcare information, anything like that, then make sure that everybody is using strong passwords, because it only takes one weak password for somebody to get into your system. And once they have compromised one account, then they've opened up a whole new world of attack surfaces that they can use to further attack your site. So make sure that you're using strong passwords. Brute force prevention. Now, for those of you not familiar, a brute force attack is nothing more than a script running on a computer that tries to log into your site over and over and over, okay? Attackers buy lists of logins and passwords that have been used from bad people, and they just plug them into this script, and it just keeps trying over and over to log in. Now, if you sit and watch your web server log files, you'll eventually identify, oh, hey, that IP address has hit login 10 times. That's probably not a good person. That's not somebody that's forgotten their password and just going over and over. That's probably a bad person. And you can block them, okay? But of course, at that point, you're not doing anything else because you've become a human pattern recognition engine, okay? A better plan is have a script that looks for these and deals with them for you. Now, there are a lot of commercial plugins out there that will do it. I'll even talk about my favorite solution in just a little bit. Oh, and just so you know, if you find an IP address doing this and you block that, it makes you feel good, but it's really not going to slow them down that much. Most serious hackers, when they're trying to get into a site, are using botnets, and they've got hundreds or even thousands of computers running this script and not hammering your site, but one and then over here and then over there. And if you've got 100 or even 1,000 computers, you're doing 2-3 tries per second, but not all on the same site. And if you block one of those, well, they've still got hundreds or thousands of them. That's okay. It does slow them down. Security is all about layers, and this is just one more layer that you can add onto it. Oh, and it does actually make you feel better when you block somebody. So, no, that didn't change. Okay. Lock down your server. Now, this is for you that run your own server. If you're running through a hosting company and they are managing your server for you, they've probably already done this. But if you're running your own server or your own virtual server, make sure that that bad boy is locked down. On any given web server, there really should only be 3 ports open. Okay, that's 80 and 443 because that's unencrypted and encrypted web traffic, and port 22. And port 22 is secure shell. That's how programmers get in so they can do maintenance on the server, but you should be requiring keys to even get in there. So you've got it really tightly locked down. Now, if you've got a database server running on your same your web server, that's okay. Most of us don't do it that way these days, but it's still okay to do that. But your database server should not be accessible from the outside. Nobody else needs to talk to your database server except your web server and programmers that you've already given access to, and they know how to set these things up. But from the outside, nobody should ever see your database, because if it's exposed, people are going to try to break into it. So you need to make sure that you've got that server locked down tight. Now, there are several both free and paid services you can use that will scan your site for you. There's even software you can run on Windows and Linux that will do that. Make sure, if you're not familiar with how these things work, I don't recommend that you do them because you probably won't understand how to interpret it properly. But if you haven't lately, if you're hosting your own website on your own server, then make sure somebody has scanned that recently and seen what ports are open, and make sure that you can identify which ports are open and why they're open. Okay, remember I told you I was going to talk to you about my favorite solution for blocking. Now, this is, again, for those of you running your own. I run a system called Fail to Ban, and it's basically a server level firewall. Fail to Ban is a script that runs and it looks at all the traffic coming in. It looks at trying to figure out how to explain this. I had it in my head. All of the traffic comes through a system called IP tables, and IP tables looks and says, is it okay for this IP address to access this port? And if you haven't explicitly said yes, then it will block it. Well, Fail to Ban allows me to easily and dynamically say, I don't want this IP address to be able to access my server anymore, without having to go through a lot of work, because IP tables config scripts are really difficult to manage. So I let Fail to Ban handle that. And I've got one command that I can type on my computer and say, hey, block this IP address. And they won't be able to use or get to anything on my server at that point. The problem is, again, I have to do that manually. So there's a plugin for WordPress that looks for things like, are they trying to do something bad, or have they tried to log in too many times, things like that. And when it triggers one of these events, then it tells Fail to Ban, hey, let's ban this person or this IP address. Now, it will ban that IP address, but not permanently. I've got Fail to Ban set up, I believe, it'll start with 1 hour, and it just keeps doubling it every time you trip the tripwire. So if the first time it'll block you for an hour, the second time it will block you for 2 hours, and then 4 hours and 8 hours. It will literally just keep multiplying it up till it's blocking you for days or even months if you keep tripping it. At any given time on the server that I manage myself, I've got about 50 to 150 IP addresses blocked. I logged in this morning and counted them right before we started, and it was blocking 46 IP addresses. Again, these change. They go. I'll release the ban, and they will be allowed to access it again. Most of them don't. They've just moved on to other sites. We're trying to put enough layers on here so that security is difficult enough so that it's just not worth it to bother. And that's one of the secrets of doing security. Now, Fail to ban and server level firewalls are very technical setup. And if you are running your own system, man, this is a great system. I have one fail to ban server running on my server, and I have 6 or 8 WordPress installs with the plugin. So anytime anybody trips it on any one of those, they're blocked from the whole site. And that's one of the ways that I get so many IP addresses in there is I've got 6 or 8 sites on there. If you're not technical, or if you're not running your own site, most top tier web hosts will have some type of blocking system built in, okay? I know I've worked with several of them. I'm only gonna mention SiteGround because they're the one hosting this, but I've worked with several of the different ones, and how it operates is different with each one, and how you interface is different with each one. SiteGround, you don't even have to interface with it. They take care of it. They look for this stuff. They look for malicious attackers, and as soon as they see it, they just block them, and you don't have to worry about it. On the fail to ban thing, yes, it is possible to lock myself out of my server. Yes, I have done so on many occasions. I have backdoors. I have another server that I can access that can access my main server, so I can go around and unban myself, because as soon as I lock myself out, I try to log in too many times or something like that, boom, I'm gone. Okay. WordPress security plugins. I noticed somebody in the chat had asked about this. Yes, there are several good WordPress security plugins. These are what we call application level firewalls, and they do a lot of different things. And I highly recommend that you look at installing an application firewall. Now, I don't recommend that you go and install one on your production site and say, hey, let's tinker with this. Production site is production. You don't want to mess with this. I have one production site that I'm actually selling products on. I don't want to run the risk of shutting that down because I'm tinkering. So I've got a mirror of that set up in what I call staging, okay? And I play with staging all I want. I try new plugins. I try all kind of things. I plug in new themes, all different things. And when I like it, then I migrate it over to production. And that's the way you should have your site set up. Most top tier websites or web hosts will allow you a staging environment. Now, I'm a programmer, so I also have a local version of every one of my sites that I can spin up and try things out if I'm writing my own plugins and things like that. But for most people, a staging site is good enough. If you don't have a WordPress application firewall installed, I recommend you create you a staging site, pick one. There's 3 or 4 of them out there. Install it. Most of them cost money. So set up the free 30-day trial and then commit to investing 2 or 3 hours of tinkering with it and figuring out how it works on your staging site. If it doesn't work the way you want, cancel the account, delete the plugin from staging, move on to the next one. Also, make sure you check the reputation of the plugin. And this is more than just looking at the WordPress.org plugins repo and seeing how many stars. Go search and search for things like put the plugin name in quotes and then the word review or the word problems or something like that. Now, every plugin on the market has haters. So you can't just say, oh, this guy hates this, I'm not going to use that, okay? But look at the overall feeling of the community towards this plugin. If a lot of people hate it, maybe there's a problem with it. If a lot of people like it, but this one person hates it, ignore that one person and keep going. But most of these plugins are not cheap. So if you're going to go down this road, block off some time to work with it in staging and commit to using that time to do it, okay? 2 or 3 hours is not a lot of time to figure out if this is going to screw anything up on your site. 2-factor authentication. Okay, last month, if you were here, we talked about payment processors. And one of the 2FA came up, and one of the comments was 2FA is a pain in the butt. And they're absolutely right. 2FA is a pain in the butt. You know what the bigger pain in the butt is? Having to clean an infected site or a hacked site. That's a huge pain in the butt, and it's usually an expensive process too. So if you can do something that, yeah, it injects a little friction, but it makes your site a lot more secure, then by all means do it. And that's what 2FA is. Now, I'm actually going to show you 2FA a little later on in the talk. But for right now, all you need to know is 2FA is you have, in addition to your login and your password, after you've put that in and click submit, then it's going to pop up another window and says, okay, what's your authentication code? And there's several authenticators out there that will generate this number for you. And you'll look at that and you'll type it in, and then it will let you in. This means if you're reusing logins and passwords, and you know you shouldn't be using it, and you know we all do, but if you're reusing login and passwords, then as long as you've got your phone and they don't have your phone, they still can't get in, okay? And that goes true for anybody else using your site. So in addition to strong passwords, anybody that has any privilege on your site whatsoever needs to have 2FA set up. This isn't just a good idea. These days, this is a must-take step for any security-conscious site owner. I probably shouldn't have to tell anybody this, but please don't use the username admin, okay? Now, thankfully, long gone are the days where WordPress would actually do this for us and set it up for us that way. Now it asks us, but and I've got some sites that I actually had to go out and change it because they are that old, and they had admin, and I went in and I did it manually with the database. But there's several different ways you can do it. Several plugins that will change it for you. Okay, but this is the one account, your admin account, that has all the keys to the kingdom. So please, don't use your name. Don't use your pet's name. Just make it a little more difficult. This is one of the 3 pieces, hopefully 3 if you're using 2FA. This is one of the 3 pieces of information that somebody needs to get access to your site. Don't just make one of them a gimme, okay? Make it a little more difficult for them. Again, layers of security is what's important. If you make it too difficult to get in, or make it so difficult that it's just not worth their time, they'll move on to the next site. And that's really the best scenario you can hope for. Again, a password manager will help you here because it will remember it for you. Disable XML RPC. Hey, XML RPC was a good idea back in the day, okay? These days, it's the vestigial tail of WordPress. It served a purpose a long time ago, but these days, 99.999% of all WordPress installs out there, it serves no purpose. So disable it. Now, it's real easy to disable, okay? A couple of lines in your functions.php will disable it, or there are plugins that will disable it. Be careful on the plugins that you get to disable it. There are some that do this, but also do other things. And if all you're looking for is this, and you get something that disables 3 or 4 things, that's a pain. And I actually did that and had it shut down my my newsletter mailing system for about 3 weeks till I figured out what I had done wrong. But like everything, every plugin you install, every theme you install, whatever, do it on staging first. And do your research into the reputation of the plugin. You spending 30 minutes searching around the internet to find the plugin that everybody says is the best will save you an awful lot of time and possibly a hack down the road. Disable file editing. I've always hated file editing in WordPress. Yeah, okay, it's convenient at times when you just want to make this quick change to the CSS file, or you just want to add something to functions.php and you don't want to fire up an editor or anything like that. Take the time to do it right. Don't just hack it there in production. Also, if you're editing stuff in WordPress, then you are editing in production, and that's never a good thing. So disable file editing. There are plugins that will do that for you. Most of the application firewall plugins have this as an option, and it's automatically turned on. All it does is prevent that edit this file dialog from popping up. Sign up with some kind of scanning service, okay? You've done if you've taken the time to do all of this other stuff, then take the time to get somebody to check your site daily or weekly or monthly to say, yes, it is still secure, and yes, it is free of malware. You do need something there that will check it. Look, bad people are using scripts to try to access your site every day. You need to use scripts to keep your site safe and keep them away. Now, there are several third-party services that will scan it for you however often you want. A lot of the top-tier hosting companies have this as a service, either free or paid, and they check your site on a regular basis and look for problems, look for things that have changed, and will report back to you if something's gone wrong. That's your first cue that something's gone wrong, and you need that. You need somebody to keep an eye on it for you, because you can't just look at it and say, oh yeah, everything's secure. That's not going to happen. How are we doing? Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, that was the long one. So, okay. Now we've locked things down. Let's talk a little bit about how important it is to keep things updated. See, as software changes, new holes open up. I mean, developers don't do this on purpose, but no software is perfect because no programmer is perfect. So when an update of something you use comes out, you need to get it installed, because usually that's hey, we found a problem and we need to get this patched. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that WordPress core stays updated. Now, the tendency is just to turn this on in production and trust, okay? I always turn it off in production. I don't allow production to update any of the plugins or the themes or WordPress core manually. I do all of that on my staging site. Then when I've installed and updated everything and poked around and make sure everything is working okay, then I allow, I go through one at a time and allow upgrades on the stuff that I've tested. Now, you can do it another way, okay? You can do what we call the update and pray method, where you just say, hey, let WordPress take care of it all, and pray that no developer screws anything up. Now, it's not always a matter of screwing things up. I know there have been times where WooCommerce have come out and said, hey, something that we allowed before in custom templates, we're not going to allow now, and we're going to block that. And I was relying on that tweak to get the user experience that I wanted. Well, all of a sudden now I broke my site. If I've tested this in staging first and looked and run through and placed a test order and make sure everything works, then I know if something broke and I can fix it before it gets into production and my users are scratching their head. Letting WordPress update staging, that's not a problem. I highly recommend that. I do it for my local, okay? I'll fire up my local account and I'll tell WordPress, just update everything. But for production, I do not allow it, because I want to make sure I'm in control of that. Okay, once you've got your procedures down for core, now you need to set up your procedures for your plugins and themes. Again, it's fine to let WordPress do this on staging and development servers, but I don't allow this in the production side. This does mean, however, that I need to stay on top of these things. Or if I'm working on a team, I need to assign somebody to make sure that they've gone out and they've said, okay, production says we have 4 new plugins that need to be updated. Somebody go test them in staging. I'm currently working with one client that on the average site, they have about 40 plugins. And on any given site, at least 10 of them have updates at any given moment. So, every morning we could, if we felt like it, we could log in and say, oh, we need to check and see what needs to be updated. We usually relegate that and do it like all at once, but with that many plugins, you're going to get something on a regular basis. But the important thing is that you do it in staging or development. Don't automatically do it in production. The operating system. This is for those of you who are running your own server. Make sure that you keep that OS upgraded. Most people don't realize how much software it actually takes to serve a web page. It takes an awful lot of both software services running and libraries that they depend on. You need to make sure that all of that stuff stays up to date. PHP, MySQL, and your web server. Now, I separate this from the operating system because these are the big pieces, and we generally don't upgrade them often. Most of your better hosts or the top tier hosts will allow you to at least control the option of what version of PHP you're running. And these days, PHP 8 should be an option. If your host doesn't allow you to run on PHP 8, you need to look for a better host, okay? Because PHP 7.4 has 6 months left on its end of life. PHP 7.5 has 1.5 years, and that's it. After that, 8's the only thing that will be supported. So you need to make sure that you're running PHP 8. You need to make sure that your host allows you. Some of the hosts allow you access to control what version of MySQL and what version of whatever web server you're using. Apache, Nginx, there's several of them out there. Lightbee, all these kind of things. You need to make sure that those stay up to date and they stay current. Now, if you're on a managed server, or your host is managing all of this, you probably don't have to mess with PHP, your database, your web server, or even the operating system. Your host will probably take care of that for you. And that is how I've got all the sites that I host at SiteGround. That's how they take care of all of that for me. I don't have to mess with it. But on the server that I run, where I host some of my weird sites that have custom programming and stuff, I have to take care of all of this. And we're talking a couple hours a week investment just to make sure everything is up to date and secure. Okay, regular backups. I talked about this in last year's security, but I'm going to talk about it again. Keep regular backups. Now, most hosts will do this for you. They'll automatically back up. Depending on your hosting plan, they might give you a nightly backup. They might keep them for a week or a month. I strongly recommend that you keep 60 days of backup. Now, that doesn't mean your host has to keep them. Most of the hosts, you can download these things locally. You need to keep a 60-day backup. And once a day or once a week, you need to go out and download one to replace it so that you've got that extra time period. See, most people, if they compromise a site, you're not going to notice it immediately. And if your site has been compromised for more than 30 days before you notice it, and they're doing things like mining Bitcoin in JavaScript on your users or things like that that you would not notice unless you're got regular scans going on, if you've only got 30 days backup and this has been going on 45 days, you're building from scratch, okay? There's no way around it because all your backups are corrupted at that point. 60 days is a good compromise. Quite honestly, on production systems that mean a lot to me, I keep 90 days and I keep a 6-month backup. And it's just a rolling one. I move everything up and download the latest one. Now I've got scripts that I don't actually do this manually. I've got scripts that take care of all of this for us. But you need to have that backup there just in case, okay? I don't think I would ever restore from my fully from my 1-year backup, but I might pull pieces out of this or out of it or pieces from the database to fix the corrupted problem. Delete everything that is not currently in use. Notice I didn't say deactivate everything that's not currently in use. If code's on your server, it can be run. I know WordPress doesn't. They make a big deal about if the plugin's turned off, they can't activate it. No, that's not true. There are ways in some situations where the code can be executed, even if it's not enabled. So if you're not currently using it, delete it. And don't give me that, but Cal, I'm about to implement this next month. Great, reinstall it next month. Make yourself a Post-it note, stick it on your wall that this is the plugin that you want to use and why you want to use it. Delete it from your site. And next month, when you get around to doing it, reinstall it, because I guarantee it's going to be at least 6 months before you get around to doing it, okay? But just get rid of it. If it's not there, code that's not on your site cannot be used to compromise your site. Okay, we've talked a lot about how to lock it down. We talked about how to keep it up to date. Now I'm going to give you a couple of pieces of advice on how to, or what to do when it's not enough, okay? So you use a scanning system, or you come in one day and you find out that your site has been compromised and all of your users have been downloaded and your users are starting to complain because their information is being shared all over the web. What do? The first thing you do is take that site offline. Okay, I don't mean put a HTML page up on the same server. I mean shut that server down temporarily until you can have a plan of action. Get that server offline where no one can see it. If you physically have a server and you physically have access to it, you don't have to turn it off. You go and unplug the network cable. Okay, that's secure enough. They can't get to it. That's all we want is to prevent whoever compromised your site from being able to use it for other things. So the first thing you do is take it offline. If you have access to your DNS and you understand how to use that, repoint your DNS to another server, put up a single page that says under construction or under maintenance or technical difficulties or whatever you want to put up there, and leave that up there until you get your site back up and operational. But the first thing you do is get that site offline. The second thing you do, and the only other piece of advice I'm going to give you, is to hire a professional. You need to understand and accept that you are not qualified to clean an infected site. Now, depending on how bad the damage is, you may be able to hire someone just to run a script that says, oh, we found these problems, we fixed these problems, we deleted these records from the database, boom, you're done. If it's bad, somebody's going to have to manually fix it. Understand that all of the code that runs your site and the entire database has to be audited and checked. And yes, this is bad. You know what's worse though? Missing how the attacker got into your site and putting your site back up online without having thoroughly cleaned it, only to have it done again. Okay. Now, if you're lucky, an auditor can find the vulnerability, and if you've got 30 to 60 days of backup, you may be able to install from a previous backup before the attack. But whatever you do, don't guess. If you don't know how they got in, don't blindly install the backup from 3 weeks ago, assume the hack was recent, and just go on. This is a recipe for a disaster. Because if your site gets compromised, your best customers, if you explain what happened and that you're taking regular precautions to keep this from happening, but it happened anyhow, most of them are going to be understanding once. If it happens a second time, you might as well hang up your hat. Okay, now for the bonus round. Y'all tired of the slide work? We got a couple more slides, and I'm actually going to pop over to WordPress. This is the only plugin I'm going to recommend to you, and the reason I'm going to recommend this to you is because it's free and it's available to anyone. Okay. SiteGround recently released a security plugin, and I got to play with it early on. I put it on one of my sites. It's now running on most of my sites. It is an absolutely wonderful plugin. It's running on sites that I have hosted on SiteGround and running on sites that I run on my own, because the great thing about this plugin is it does not require SiteGround hosting to be useful to you. Matter of fact, there are no SiteGround specific options in this plugin. They just gave this back to the community, and I love when companies contribute back to the community. I appreciate SiteGround doing so. Other thing I like about it is everything's optional. When you install it, almost everything is turned on, but you go in and say, no, I don't want that, don't want that, don't want that. I turned off I turned off one thing, maybe two on some of my sites, but everything is optional. You don't have to use any piece of it. First thing it does is, remember we talked about your, we didn't talk about this. It locks and protects system folders, okay? So it keeps people from being able to access the system folders. There are directories that only WordPress should be able to write to, and this keeps them locked. I do that as a programmer. My update script, because I manually update WordPress on my systems, and my update script keeps these directories locked. And when it gets ready to do an update, it will unlock them, it will do the update, and then we'll lock them back down just so that people can't go get in and do it. If you don't want to have to go through all that manually, the SiteGround Security plugin will do that for you. Hide the WordPress version Remember I said security is layers? Okay, one of the layers is not telling them what you're running. I know a lot of plugins. I've got plugins, I'm not gonna name names, but if you view source on your website, you'll see a lot of plugins that identify the plugin and the version number that's running. This is just telling attackers what you're running, and they can look and say, hey, is anything vulnerable in this? If so, they're gonna start hammering your site on that vulnerability. Don't do them any favors. Disable editing. We talked about this, okay? And this will take care of this for you. If you don't have an application firewall that's doing this for you already, just disable editing with this plugin. Remember we talked about XML RPC? This will disable that for you. It's real easy to do, but if you're not a programmer, then you've got to go find a plugin that will do it and do it without doing anything else. And the SiteGround Security plugin will do that. If that's all you want, then you turn that on, you turn everything else off, boom, you're done. It will disable RSS. Now, this has caused me problems in the past. Not the SiteGround Security plugin, but I installed a plugin to disable XML RPC, and without telling me, it also disabled RSS. Well, I run a podcast, and Apple picks up my podcast by picking up an RSS feed. And I run I use MailerLite for my newsletter, and MailerLite sends out emails by picking up my newsletter RSS feed and saying, oh, you've got something new to say, let me go ahead and send it out. So this is the one option that I turn off. But hey, the great thing about this is it doesn't care. Everything else still works just fine. Login access. Now, this is kind of interesting. If you only ever access your website from your desktop computer and you have a static IP address, you can limit who can log into your site with this plugin. You can say only login attempts from this server are valid. Everything else gets blocked. That's great. If you don't have a static IP address, be very careful. Also, if you use a laptop and you work from coffee shops and stuff like this, this is going to be a problem. What I usually do is allow access from my VPN, because my VPN is always static, and that way, no matter what device I'm using, as long as it's connected to my VPN, I've got the same IP address so I can log in. 2FA, this has 2FA. Matter of fact, I'm going to install this just so I can show you how easy 2FA is. This has 2FA built in. You don't have a lot of options, but that's okay because it's very simple to do. So you don't need a lot of options for this. If you're looking for granularity of who gets it and that kind of stuff, this might not be the best 2FA implementation for you. But if you turn it on in this plugin, it's going to do, I think admins, editors, and authors automatically have it turned on for them. And then it, of course, disables the admin username. We've discussed this, but you should never have any login with the admin username. And it does handle brute force attacks, okay? You can tell it how many times somebody can try to log in. I think the default is 5. And beyond 5, then it's going to lock them down. 5 is generous in my book. Since I'm using a password manager, I set mine to 2. Okay, if you try to log into one of my sites more than twice and fail both times, it's going to lock you out. Yes, that's tripped me up before, but it's a price I pay. Okay, demo time. I think I can do this. Hang on just 1 second. Let me see if... Oh, good, you can. Okay. Okay, demo time. This is one of my playground sites, okay? SiteGround has a button that says create a site with a demo domain name. And so it just creates them for me. And I do this all the time to play around with new ideas. So this one exists right now while I'm doing this live. It probably doesn't exist if you're watching this on YouTube, because I'll throw this one away just as soon as it's done. That's why I don't worry about passwords or anything like that. So if we look over here at the dashboard, you will see that this is as secure as a WordPress install can be. I have 0 plugins. I have exactly 1 theme. That's the theme that I am currently using. That's the way it should be. But I need to do this, I'm going to need a plugin. So let's add a new one. Let's say SiteGround. And we're going to install the SiteGround Security plugin. If you are using SiteGround and you set up a new domain, it automatically installs this for you. I actually had to go in here and delete the 3 plugins that SiteGround automatically installs, and this is one of them. Notice now we've got the SiteGround Security. Let's look at the dashboard. Just gives us basics and a little bit of recent activity, and we can see the recent activity. But see, that doesn't give us a whole lot. This is one of my production sites. And as you can see, it's got a lot more. And it even shows, I didn't refresh it because it's got Googlebot, and Googlebot actually spidered one of my pages. And I've got a bunch of people that are trying to hit XML RPC. Now you'll notice it says 200, because if you just try to get XML RPC, it says, oh, sure, I'll give you that. It returns and says, hey, we don't allow you to just get this. You have to post to it. If you were to post to it, then it would block it, and it wouldn't allow you to do that. Let's see. But for the most part, I have people, humans trying to log in. And since the only 2 logins that exist on this site are me and my wife, I've got a lot of people that are just trying to log. I don't think these are actually humans. I think these are scripts. But like I said, the good news is because I run fail to ban, as you can see right there, if it tries it too many times, it's just going to lock them out. Okay, so let's look at the site security options. As you can see, I've got them all turned on. I usually turn this one off, okay? But the rest of those, that's how hard it is to turn them on and off, okay? But I leave all of this turned on. And I also go here and delete the default README. WordPress, in case you don't know, drops a default readme.html in there, and it has version number and changelog and stuff like that. You don't need to give anybody the access to that, so just delete it. Then we'll talk about login security, and I could configure login access here to lock out, but except for certain IP addresses. I'm not going to. What I am going to do is configure or turn on 2-factor authentication for admin and editors. So if you're an admin or you're an editor, the next time you try to log into my site, it's going to require you to set 2FA up. That's all it takes to configure. Now, I've been using 2FA for quite some time on some of my sites, and the early days it was not this easy to set up. Nowadays it's real easy to set up. And then I can limit the login attempts here. I'm going to leave it set at 5. Now, I'm going to log out. If I like my pirate picture there. Okay, let's see if I can remember the login for this. This is a test site. That's why I'm using my email address. I don't for my production sites. Okay, now it sees that I need to have 2-factor authentication set up, and it knows that I haven't set it up already. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that, but that's Google Authenticator. That's the one that I use, and it's got a QR code on there. So I click on Add, and I say Scan the QR code, and I hold my phone up. You can't see it, but I'm doing that. And then it gives me a code. I type that code in, and I am now authenticated, and I am now in. Now, every time I log in from now on, it's going to ask me for that authentication code, and it's going to be different every time, changes every 30 seconds. That's why I'm not really worried about any of you seeing the code, because it changes in 30 seconds. That code does you no good whatsoever. So that's how you turn 2FA on. It literally is that simple. Okay, let's go back. So we've talked about all of the features that it gives you. And like I said, the only reason I am recommending this plugin is because it is free and it is available to anyone. It's not something that is just available to SiteGround users. You notice that nothing on there that I showed you said log into your SiteGround control panel and configure this. It's available to anybody. I've got this running on most of my sites. I have a a poetry site, a site that I wrote love poems for my wife. And that is what I describe as a trivial website. I don't have it running on that because if that gets hacked, I can delete that off the internet and nobody would notice. I don't think my wife goes out there anymore. But if it's anything other than a trivial website, then you need to have something installed. And if you don't have anything else installed, I highly recommend you go with the SiteGround Security plugin.